Today, we are talking about spiritual warfare and what it actually looks like in everyday life. Sometimes people hear the word spiritual warfare and immediately think about something that's dramatic, something that's obvious or extreme, or something you would instantly recognize. But honestly, a lot of spiritual warfare looks much more subtle than people realize. And that is why so many people don't recognize it while it's happening. Sometimes spiritual warfare looks like constant mental heaviness or feeling irritated all the time, emotionally exhausted, triggered easily, or stuck in negative thought patterns. Sometimes it looks like confusion. You can't think clearly. You feel mentally pulled in every direction, or your mind never feels settled. Sometimes it looks like isolation. You slowly start disconnecting from people. You shut down. You keep everything inside. And sometimes it looks like constant offense. Everything feels personal. Everything feels like an attack. You're frustrated more easily than normal. And if you are not spiritually aware, you'll think all of it is just your personality or just coincidence or circumstances, when really there's something deeper influencing your thoughts, your emotions, and your reactions. And I think one of the biggest misunderstandings about spiritual warfare is people think it only shows up during major moments. But a lot of times, it shows up in everyday life, in your thoughts, your reactions, your relationships, or emotional patterns. The enemy understands that if he can affect your mind, he can affect your decisions. If he can keep you emotionally overwhelmed, then he can keep you distracted. If he can keep you offended, then he creates division. And the dangerous part about that is when something becomes normal to you, you stop questioning it. So now you living in anxiety, it feels normal. You're living irritated. That feels normal. You're living disconnected and you think it's normal. And instead of fighting spiritually, people just start adapting to these unhealthy patterns, right? But I need you to know this. Not every thought deserves agreement. Not every emotion deserves control over you or your behavior. And not every feeling is reflecting truth. And this is where spiritual maturity becomes important because spiritual warfare isn't always about yelling or fear or dramatic moments. Sometimes it's about recognizing this thought is not leading me to peace, or this mindset is pulling me away from clarity. This emotional pattern is changing how I respond to people. And once you recognize it, you stop just reacting and you start responding intentionally. You pray different. You guard your mind differently. You become more careful about what you agree with. And one of the biggest parts of spiritual warfare is learning how to replace lies with truth. The enemy thrives in distortion. He wants you to believe that you'll never change, that nobody cares, that you're stuck, that things will never get better. Everybody's against you. But God's word brings clarity. It reminds you who you really are. It reminds you how to think, how to respond, how to stay grounded when your emotions are trying to pull you somewhere unhealthy. And honestly, a lot of spiritual warfare looks like everyday moments where you have to decide, am I going to agree with what's destroying my peace, or am I going to bring back my mind to under truth? And that battle happens more often than people realize. So if you've been feeling mentally heavy or overwhelmed or irritated or discouraged, don't just assume it's just how you are. Pay attention spiritually. because spiritual warfare often shows up quietly before it ever shows up loud. And learning to recognize it can change the way you think and the way you respond and the direction your life starts moving. If this spoke to you, start paying attention this week to the thoughts, the emotions, and the patterns you've been agreeing with. And ask yourself honestly, is this leading me towards peace or away from it?